In this lesson, we're going to create a preliminary plan of our garden. Let's have a quick look at our whole design process. We've created the bubble plan, and now we're going to take that and turn it into a preliminary plan. The bubble plan that you've selected gives you an idea of roughly where things go in the garden and how big they are. How much space are they going to use? But in that process, we didn't make any decisions about the shape of things. If we're going to have a patio, is it rectangular? Is it square? What kind of material are we going to use in that patio? We haven't made any of those decisions yet, but we're going to start doing that now. We're going to use the bubble plan as a guide to locate things, and now we're going to make some more refined decisions about what is going to go in each of those spaces. The bubble plan is just a guide. If during this process you come up with some great ideas and want to change that, feel free to do that. But in the back of your mind, always keep that wants and needs list in mind. When we're finished this process, we want to have as many of those wants and needs in our plan. Feel free to be creative, but keep our goal in mind. Now, there's several approaches to making this preliminary plan. You can just sit down and start drawing, and there's nothing wrong with that process. Many of us tend not to be that creative, and that includes me. And I find that a process works better than for me to just sit at a blank page and start coming up with ideas. In this video, we're going to use a process that's based on shape. We're going to pick a shape like a circle, and we're going to use that to guide us through a design process. Then we're going to pick a different shape, a rectangle, and we're going to go through the same process again using rectangles. Then I'm going to do a third plan using triangles and trapezoid. By focusing on one shape at a time, you tend to create cohesiveness in the garden. One area looks like it belongs to another area. This is a very common principle in design. Stick to one type of shape, but you don't have to follow that rule. There's nothing to say that you can't put rectangles and circles into the same garden. To start this process, I'm going to create a preliminary plan using circles. I go back to my site survey and start with that. And I'm going to start in the area that I think needs to be solved first. This area outside the back door. I can see two different options here. I could make a low patio and then a set of steps going down to that patio. I could also make a deck, something that's at the same height as this doorway. If you remember, this is 3 feet up above the ground, so I'd put a deck here that's 3 feet above the ground. Both of those will work, and neither is right. You need to go back to your needs and wants and the style you like. Personally, I don't like to come out to a set of steps to go down to the patio. When I'm having a barbecue or I have some friends over and we're having some drinks, I'm going in and out of this door quite a bit. I like to have this at the same level. The same is true when I barbecue. I want to barbecue up here. And it's so much easier to move your kitchen material in and out when these are at the same level. So I lean towards a deck. But decks are kind of boring. And decks work best if they're straight lines. So I'm thinking something different. I've gone on the internet and I found several pictures of raised areas that are kind of curved and made out of rocks. And I kind of like that. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking of a shape, something like this. Raised up 3 feet. And then I'll put some steps here to take me down to grade level. The surface can be made out of patio stones. The key here is to start thinking about what you might want, but a lot of these things are going to still change. We're just exploring ideas to see how they fit in the space. As you're drawing these in, try to get the size approximately correct. We still have squares on this piece of paper, and we know each one of these is 2 feet. So we can look at this and say, okay, we know how big this patio is, and that will suit our purposes. If I had a really big family, well, I might need to make this bigger. The other area I want to focus on is over here. I have to have a way to come in from outside to go to this patio. The most natural way to do this is to simply create a pathway. Now at this stage, we don't know what we're going to make that out of yet. We're just trying to position it and get a feel for the size of it. But this allows my visitors to come around, go up on my patio. Now this end's pretty open right now. We have people walking across the sidewalk here. We have another sidewalk in front of the house. Lots of people are able to look into this open garden. So we want to put a fence here. We want to close this off somehow. But if you remember the bubble plan, we want a vegetable garden here. We don't want to reduce the amount of light this gets. So rather than a traditional fence here and gate, I'm thinking something a little lower, something like a wrought iron gate. That wrought iron material lets light come through, and so it still gets lots of light in my vegetable garden. Over here, I want a destination. I want something over here to draw me out here. And I'm thinking something like a pergola. A nice round structure. A gazebo, maybe. Now I've got a tree in the middle here, but this tree can come out without too much trouble. I've kept the shape, I'm still doing curves, and I have a destination. Now I've probably drawn this a bit on the small size. It's only about 10 feet across, and I might want it bigger than that. The thing to do is to think about what you're going to do here. Is this set up for a couple people to have comfy chairs and have a drink? Or do I want the whole family of 10 people out here having a barbecue? That will determine how big I need to make this. Now, of course, I need to have some way to get from here to here and to here. So we'll put another pathway in here. What about this area in here? Well, we can do lots of things there. If I'm a plant person, I might turn that into a large perennial garden, and I can have 100 different perennials growing there. If I like fruit trees, I might put in a couple apple trees. Go back to your wants and needs list and figure out what you want to add to this garden. One of the things that works really well in a garden is try and make rooms. Separate this area from this area. One of the things that does is make the whole garden look so much bigger. So I'm thinking of some shrubs here. 6 foot, 8 foot tall shrubs. What that will do is block the view between here and here. So when I'm sitting on the patio here, I might see the roof of this gazebo, but I won't be able to see the whole thing. That adds mystery to the garden. It also gives me a real definite place to go that's separated from this. So I kind of like this. The other thing that's on my want list is a pond. Now I have a couple of options. I could put a pond over here. That would be an interesting idea. I could also put a pond in here, over here. So I still have lots of options for that. But I'm kind of leaning towards putting it here. What I like about this is that I'll be sitting here and I'll be able to see the pond. That will draw me into the garden. Once I'm at the pond, I'll see the gazebo and be drawn around the corner to the gazebo. So now I've got a couple focal points in my garden. How about this side? We wanted something to block the neighbors, and I also like to have a native woodland garden, sort of a shady area. Right now, I have sun everywhere all day long, and that's a bit too much sun. It would be nice to get some shade into this. So how about some trees? We'll put some taller trees in here. And underneath that, we'll put a wildlife garden, a nice shady area. It'll block the neighbor's view, give me some shade in the garden, and give me something interesting to see from the patio. We're going to put some utility stuff in here later. Better figure out a path coming this way. Now I've still got an area here. I could put in another garden. I have little areas all over the place here where I can still add plants if I want. But I've taken this to the point where I'm starting to see a finished garden. I have my main areas of interest. I can see how they connect together. So in my mind, it's starting to look like a garden. I can start visualizing the final design. And that's as far as I want to take this. A preliminary garden plan is just that. It's preliminary. It's an idea. It's a sketch of things that I just might do. Or I might erase the whole thing and start over again, do something completely different. Let's try making a different preliminary plan. This time we're going to use rectangles and straight lines. We're still going to use our bubble plan as our basic outline, but we're going to change the way things look. We still want a deck here. I still like to have this high. So let's put a deck in here. And we'll need some steps. I still need a pathway to go from the front of the house to this deck. But rather than curvy pathways, we want to use rectangles and squares. So one of the things that I really like is just using some patio stones. But rather than use the common rectangular patio stones, how about if we make the shape like this? More like a rectangle. I'm drawing this fairly quickly so you don't spend a lot of time watching me draw, but you can take your time and make this a little neater. It's kind of obvious to take the pathway to here, over here, and up the steps, but that's kind of boring. What if we put something more interesting here? We're interested in having a pond, but what if we replace the pond with a fountain? This would be an excellent place for a fountain. When you design a garden with linear lines, it tends to look much more formal. And a nice fountain here adds to that formal look. And we'll put something in the middle. Some lady with water sprouting out of her hands. I still like the idea of putting a vegetable bed over here and using wrought iron here, but now this will have to be a more formal design. Maybe it's a little taller with a really fancy gate. We don't want to get too carried away with the details, but having some idea that this will be a wrought iron helps us visualize this. Over here, we still want our getaway, but now it's going to be a rectangular place. It's great having elevation in the garden, and this is all fairly flat, except we do have a slope here. But what if we take this and we raise it up just a foot, just enough to give it a little more character? And then we add a step here to go into it. Put some big posts in the corners. Put some fancy top on it. Again, the details come later, but some sort of a wooden structure that we can sit under. And remember, this garden is really sunny, so we want the roof on here to give us a shady area to sit. Well, let's continue our pathway here. As you're designing this, think about the views that people will have and the focal points. So I'm sitting on the deck here, looking out on my garden. We can put something right at the end of this pathway to draw my attention and to get me to walk into the garden this way. So this would be a perfect place for some sort of statue. A big piece of art. That will draw me down here. And once I'm here, then I look this way and see this structure, and I will go this way. So think about where the views are and where the focal points are. In my last design, I put in some shrubbery here to try and separate these and make this into a separate room, and I really like that idea, so I'm going to use it again. Bunch of 12-foot shrubs in here. But this time I think I might make another entrance to my structure back here. So now when the visitor comes in, they'll come through this gate, they'll see this fountain, they'll be attracted to here. They can either come up on the deck for a beer, or maybe they'll come straight through down to here where we're having a party. I like benches in the garden, and I like to put benches where there's a nice view. And this seems like a perfect place for a bench. And if we put a little pathway over to it, we attract people to it. So if I'm at the fountain, I look this way, I see a nice comfy bench. We'll put our trees back in here because we want this area nice and shady. So we'll have shade around our bench. Now I have a place to sit, look at the fountain. If I'm sitting on the deck, I have a nice view this way. I have artwork here. And I still have spaces in the middle here to plant things. One of the things you have to decide is, how much of a gardener are you? Is this space for you to grow plants? Is this space mostly to look really good but be low maintenance? This kind of design here can be very low maintenance, and I don't need to put a lot more plants in here. If I put mostly gravel in these areas, take out all the lawn, I have a very low maintenance garden that looks really nice all year long. Now we still have this deck, and right now it's completely open. It's really sunny here, so I'm thinking of covering it up. Put some beams across. Now we have a shady area here, but I don't have a sunny area anymore. So that's a trade-off. I have to decide, do I leave this sunny? Do I cover it up and make it shady? Maybe I leave this open and let this be a sunny area. So I can barbecue in the shade, and if I want to go sit in the sun, I have some nice easy chairs here I can lay out in the sun. I really like the idea of this fountain here, because it actually solves another one of my problems. If you remember, this is a sidewalk here. Next to the sidewalk is a fairly busy road. So there's a lot of traffic running down here all the time, and you can hear it from this backyard. By putting a fountain between here and the road, this fountain will dull the noise. You're going to hear moving water instead of moving cars, and that makes this garden much more pleasant. So I really like the idea of moving water. This part of the garden is now looking very formal. And if you remember, we're going to put vegetables here. Okay, that's the exact opposite of formal. So one of the things I could do is to put a hedge in here. You know those boxwood hedges? Whenever you see those in a garden, they just scream formality. The boxwood hedges would also hide some of the messy vegetables here, while at the same time telling the visitor that this is a formal garden. There's one other thing I'd like to do here. If you remember, this area here can be seen by the neighbors who have a high deck. So when they're sitting out on their deck here, they can view right into our deck. And I'd like to do something about that. So one of the things we can do is put a big arbor on here. A nice tall structure, and we can have vines growing up this part here. So that'll give us some protection from the neighbors gawking in at our lunch. So that's starting to look pretty good. Lots of design decisions still to be made, but I'm starting to get a feel of what it might look like and where things might be. I like this design too, but don't pick one of these too soon. Drop a couple more. I'm going to do one more for you. The last two preliminary plans were pretty traditional. One uses rectangles and the other uses circles. And both of those work. They make very pleasing gardens. But try to do at least a couple drawings that are kind of outside the box. Use weird shapes and see what you come up with. Sometimes it's the weird shapes that make the most interesting garden. So let's try something a little different here. We're going to go with a backyard deck. And we're going to put it on ground level rather than raised up. See how that works. But rather than the traditional shape, we're going to do something a bit odd. We're going to give it a kind of a trapezoid look. We'll put some steps in here. And in fact, what I think we'll do with this is we'll make it partially raised. If we raise this up about a foot above grade, then we have fewer steps here. When I need to go from here into the garden, we can add an extra step down. So we've kind of split the steps between here and here. That makes it a little easier. Now we're going to do something that seems a little odd, but works really well in a small garden because it makes that garden look so much bigger. Rather than making traditional boards going this way or this way, we're going to follow this angle here. And the boards of this deck are going to be laid like this. When you put the decking in on an angle to the house, the deck will appear as if it's much larger than it really is. So this is a great little trick for small backyards. Now I'd still like to get some water features in here. So I have kind of an idea of something that would look kind of weird, but I think it would be really great looking. And that's really one of the things you want to do with these preliminary garden plans. Try the really weird stuff and see if you might like it. This is going to be a pond. I'm thinking of a fairly shallow pond. And over here, why don't we put in kind of a waterfall? A modern looking waterfall. It'll just be a shelf where the water rolls off and drops down, say, 2 feet. That will give us a lot of noise, which will help deaden the traffic going along here. It'll also give us something really interesting to look at when we're sitting on our deck. It adds movement to the garden, which is always nice. But how do we get from here to the rest of the garden? Something that I've seen that I really like is to actually put the walkway right over the water. So we're going to put some rectangular stones in the pond. And the way you get over to the other side is you actually walk across this bridge. This adds some more character to the pond, kind of splits the left and right side up a little bit, makes it a little more interesting. The right side here we can leave alone and we can fill it with water lilies. Or if you're not really a plant person, you could very easily put some sort of a fountain in here. Or maybe just a statue. Because we already have water falling here, maybe a statue here would be good. I like plants, so if it was me, I'd put lots of water lilies in here. I could have a whole collection of them. Now, if you put the water lilies here, you don't want to have moving water here because water lilies like to have calm water. Having it drop over here is okay because by the time the ripples come here, it won't bother the plants. The other thing I'd like to try with this garden is to kind of split it in half. Kind of make 2 separate rooms so we have this side of the garden and we have this side of the garden. That will make the whole thing appear so much bigger. So I came up with this idea. A long arbor. Those are cross pieces over the top. And you'll be able to walk up and down this arbor. So you'll be able to walk from the deck, across the bridge, into an opening in the arbor, and then you'll be able to go left or right. And this arbor will cover up with roses, or my favorite, clematis. We can have clematis growing all over here. Any kind of vine will work. That will give us a wall here so that you actually can't see much through it. The arbor won't be completely solid, so you'll have glimpses from this side to this side, but you won't be able to see the whole thing, adding some mystery to the garden. So the person walks across here, and we could have them come out here, but that's not that interesting. I think what we're going to do is block this off, and we're going to make the person walk this way and come out here. We'll put a walkway in here. I don't know what this is yet. Could just be gravel, could be patio stones. It could mimic this, so we make blocks here. Lots of options here, but this is the pathway. And then what we're going to do is we want another piece at the end here, this destination piece. And we'll follow the same lines that we have here. I think we'll leave this open so we get sun here, maybe put some shade here. So we'll want to put something on top, some sort of beams, some sort of a roof system. Again, at this point, I'm not entirely sure what this will look like, but there are lots of options here. In the middle here, I want to put a special garden. Years ago, I went to some Japanese gardens, and I just love some of their design. So what I'm going to do in here is put in a sand garden. And this will have a wall, small wall going all the way around the outside. so you can't walk in that area. This will get covered with gravel, and we use 1/4-inch gravel for that. And then we'll get some really nice moss-covered rocks in here. Maybe another one here. And these sand gardens in Japanese gardens are designed to be very minimalistic, but they represent the ocean. So the sand is the water, and these rocks are islands. And these gardens are designed to be viewed from outside the garden. You never walk in here. In fact, once this is done, then we'll rake this and put waves in here. Very traditional Japanese garden. You'll be able to view it from here. You'll be able to see it as you walk across here. And if you're sitting over here, you might be able to glimpse some of these rocks through the arbor. We're still going to put our vegetable garden here, some sort of a gate system. We'll have some sort of a pathway going in here onto our deck. Now remember, we're going to make the deck about 1 foot up off the ground, so we need a little step here. So I'll be able to come into the garden like this, go on the deck. We can put another step over here to take us to our utility area around here. That's starting to be really interesting. Now once I'm in the arbor, these things are great for directing the person's view. And so what we want to do is we want to put something interesting here and here, kind of destination points. So I'm thinking maybe a statue here. This will be a pretty big one. Ideally, it's going to be 5-6 feet tall. Maybe it's a shorter statue, but it's on a pedestal and we want to raise it up. So when I'm in here and I look down here, I see something really interesting, and we'll extend this out so I can actually go to it and visit it. We also want something here. And remember, we have our neighbors that are gawking at us, and we want to close this off. And I still like the idea of sort of a woodland area with trees here. But let's put a pathway here. Come around like this, all the way around to the other side. Since this is a woodland garden, maybe we'll just use wood chips here rather than actual patio stones. And maybe we'll put some logs in here to kind of direct the person so they can see that this is a pathway. And then over here, let's put a bench. And there'll be trees in here. And this will be a shady, cool place to have a seat. And you'll be able to look back through the arbor all the way back to the other end and see the statue. So we'll line up the bench and the statue along this line here. That's starting to look really good. We still have some areas that we can use for planting. So we've got this whole area here. We could put some shrubs in here, kind of hide our statue from the public. It has a lot of things going on in this garden, so there's lots of interest. We have a big pond. We have splashing water to cut down the noise from the traffic. We have a Japanese garden here, which people really enjoy. This is going to be such a surprise for new visitors who've never seen this garden. They're going to come along here and suddenly, wow, there's this big Japanese garden sitting here. It's also a very low maintenance design. We do have a pond, which is a little bit of work. If we put clematis on here, they're very little work. Prune them in the spring, that's about it. This is very little work, except cleaning off some leaves if they fall on here. Woodland gardens are also low maintenance. So this is actually a very low maintenance garden. A couple things to point out about this garden. We do have the shapes positioned and we have some ideas, but we haven't made all of the decisions yet. We don't know what we're going to make this pathway out of. We don't know what we're going to do over here. It is a pathway, but we don't know how we're going to make it yet. There's lots of different designs for the arbor, so flexibility there. Over here, we got a variety of different construction designs we can pick. So although we're getting close to the design, it's still preliminary. You now watched me create 3 preliminary plans for my garden. It's your turn. Take your bubble plan and start drawing. Make as many of these as you want. You'll probably start some of these sketches and then halfway through you say, this isn't working, and throw it in the garbage. That's great. That's part of the process. Each one you do will improve the final plan. So make lots of mistakes. The more plans you work through, the better your final garden design will be. As you're doing that, keep your wants and needs in the back of your mind. They have to be the driving force for creating this garden. The other thing that will be very useful at this point is your picture file. You notice that as I was going through my drawing, I put up some of the pictures from my picture file to show you what I was thinking in my mind. I had seen something in a garden I really liked, and I thought, well, I'm going to use that. I'm going to take that idea and put it into my plan. It's not a bad idea to go through your whole picture file before you even start the process. That way it's fresh in your mind. Use those ideas that you've collected and start putting them into your design. Now this whole process is a little complicated. You've got your bubble plan, you've got all those landscape design ideas, you've got your picture file, you have a vision in your mind, but the goal here is to put all that together. It's not an easy process, but it is a lot of fun. Don't get frustrated with it, and understand that it's an iterative process. Then put the whole thing aside, even for a couple days. Let it settle in your mind, then come back and start it again. Don't rush this process. So your homework from this video is to create as many preliminary plans as you want, and then pick the best one. See you in the next video.